The message arrived on a cold morning when the twin suns of Valoria had just begun to rise over the Crystal Mountains. Lyran Voskath stood by the window of her family's tower, watching the light dance through the transparent walls, when her mother entered the room with a face that held no expression at all. Among her people, this meant something terrible had happened. "The Galactic Accord has been signed," her mother said. "You have been chosen." Lyran did not need to ask what she had been chosen for. She had heard the whispers for months. The Valorian High Council had been negotiating with the Terran Confederacy, the government of the humans, for nearly a year. Both civilizations faced destruction at the hands of the Dominion, a ruthless empire that consumed worlds like a fire consumes dry grass. Alone, neither the Valorians nor the humans could survive. Together, they might stand a chance, but alliances between species required trust. And trust, the Council had decided, required bonds that could not be broken. 12 noble Valorians would marry 12 humans of equal standing. It was an old tradition, one that had not been used in centuries. Lyran had never imagined it would touch her life. "Who is he?" she asked, keeping her voice steadied. Her mother, High Matriarch Saloon, handed her a small data tablet. On the screen was the image of a human male. He had dark hair cut short, dark eyes that seemed to look through the picture itself, and a face that showed no warmth. His name was Cole Harrison. He was a commander in the Terran Navy, decorated for bravery in 17 separate engagements against the Dominion. Lyran studied the image for a long time. She had seen humans before, of course, in recordings and diplomatic transmissions, but she had never expected to bind her life to one. "I know this is difficult," her mother said, "but you must understand what is at stake. The Dominion has already destroyed 4 of our colony worlds. The humans have lost even more. If we do not unite our forces, our civilizations will fall within a generation." "I understand duty," Lyran replied. "I have always understood duty. But understanding does not make this easier." Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You have 3 weeks to prepare. Use them wisely." After her mother left, Lyran began her research. If she was going to marry a human, she would learn everything there was to know about them. She accessed every database, every cultural study, every historical record she could find. What she discovered did not comfort her. Humans were young. Their species had achieved space travel only 400 years ago, while Valorians had walked among the stars for 12,000 years. Yet, in that short time, humans had expanded across dozens of star systems, building colonies and stations with a speed that other species found alarming. They did not wait. They did not plan for centuries before acting. They simply moved forward, adapting to every challenge they encountered. They were also predators. Unlike Valorians, who had evolved from peaceful gatherers, humans had spent most of their history hunting other creatures for food. They still ate meat, something that made Lyran's stomach turn. Their bodies were designed for pursuit. They could run for hours without stopping. They could survive injuries that would kill most other species. They healed with remarkable speed, but what disturbed Lyran most was their emotional nature. Valorians felt emotions, of course, but they had learned over millennia to control them, to think before acting, to approach life with calm logic. Humans had no such control. They loved with an intensity that seemed almost painful. They grieved so deeply that they could become physically ill from loss. They formed bonds so strong that they would die for each other without hesitation. Lyran read account after account of human behavior that seemed almost insane to her Valorian mind. A human mother lifting a vehicle that should have been far too heavy for her because her child was trapped beneath it. Human soldiers throwing themselves on explosive devices to save their companions. Humans working themselves to exhaustion for people they had never met, simply because those people needed help. It was terrifying. How could she live with a being who felt everything so intensely? How could she build a life with someone whose emotions were like storms, unpredictable and overwhelming? She looked again at the image of Cole Harrison. His military record was impressive. He had led rescue missions into Dominion territory. He had saved thousands of lives. But the more she read about his actions, the more she wondered about the man behind them. Was he a hero, or was he simply a human doing what humans always did, throwing himself into danger because he could not stop himself? The days passed too quickly. Lyran attended briefings on human customs, human language, human expectations. She learned that humans shook hands when they met, pressing their palms together in a gesture of trust. She learned that they valued eye contact as a sign of honesty. She learned that they smiled to show happiness, though they also smiled when they were nervous, which seemed confusing. Her friends came to say goodbye. Some of them tried to be encouraging, telling her that perhaps humans were not as bad as the story suggested. Others were honest in their fear for her. One of her closest friends, a young woman named Tezara, held her hands and told her to be strong. "You are going into the unknown," Tezara said. "But you are Valorian. You are made of crystal and starlight. Whatever this human is, you will endure." On the night before her departure, Lyran stood alone on the balcony of her family's tower, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a metal station floating in the void between worlds, a human man was waiting to meet her. She wondered if he was afraid too. She wondered if he had read about Valorians the way she had read about humans. She wondered if he found her as strange and frightening as she found him. She did not sleep that night. When the transport arrived in the morning, she boarded it with her head held high and her heart beating faster than it ever had before. She was Lyran Vosketh, daughter of the High Matriarch, and she would face this challenge the way she faced all challenges. With dignity, with courage, with the quiet determination that had carried her people through 12,000 years of history. But beneath that determination, hidden where no one could see, was a fear she could not name. A fear that the human waiting for her would prove to be everything she dreaded. A fear that this marriage would be a prison from which she could never escape. She watched her homeworld shrink in the viewport until it was nothing but a bright spot among millions of other bright spots. Then she turned away and began the journey toward her future. Whatever that future held, she would meet it on her feet. Unity Station hung in the darkness of space like a jewel caught between two worlds. Half of it gleamed with the smooth, flowing architecture of Valorian design, all curves and crystal and soft light. The other half was unmistakably human, angular and practical, built from metal and function rather than beauty. Where the two halves met, engineers from both species had worked together to create something new. A blend of styles that belonged to neither civilization. Alone, Lorraine's transport docked at the Valorian section of the station. As she stepped through the airlock, she found herself surrounded by others like her. 12 Valorians who had been chosen for the marriage exchange. Some were male, some female. All of them wore the same expression of controlled anxiety that Lyran felt on her own face. She recognized a few of them from diplomatic functions. There was Mevin, a tall male with silver eyes who came from one of the oldest noble families. There was Selith, a young woman barely past her coming-of-age ceremony, who looked like she might cry at any moment. And there was Counselor Drath, an older male who had volunteered for the exchange to set an example for the younger participants. They gathered in a waiting room with windows that looked out at the stars. No one spoke at first. What was there to say? They'd all read the same reports, attended the same briefings, felt the same fears. Finally, Mevin broke the silence. "Has anyone considered refusing?" "We cannot refuse," Counselor Drath said. "The Alliance depends on us. The survival of our people depends on the Alliance. There is no honorable way to step back now. Honor will mean nothing if we are unhappy for the rest of our lives. Seleth whispered. Lyra Ann wanted to comfort the younger woman, but she could not find words that would not sound hollow. Instead, she turned to the window and watched as a new ship approached the station. It was human in design, a military vessel called the Resolute. According to the briefing, it carried the 12 humans who would become their partners. The ship docked on the human side of the station. Through the window, Lyran could see tiny figures emerging from the vessel, moving with the quick, purposeful stride that seemed to characterize everything humans did. Even from this distance, she could tell they were different from her people. Their movements were sharper, more sudden, as if they were always ready to spring into action. An hour later, the two groups were brought together in the central meeting hall. The room had been designed to make both species comfortable, with temperature and lighting set to a middle ground between human and Valorian preferences. Long tables held food and drink from both worlds. Music played softly, a careful selection of sounds that would not offend either culture. Lyran stood with her fellow Valorians on one side of the room while the humans entered from the other. She studied them as they walked in, trying to match faces to the images she had been given. There was a woman with red hair who moved with the confidence of a leader. There was a young man who kept looking around the room with wide, curious eyes. There was an older woman with gray in her hair who smiled warmly at the Valorians despite the tension in the room. And then she saw him. Cole Harrison. He was taller than she had expected. In his image, he had looked stern and hard. In person, he still looked serious, but there was something else in his face that the image had not captured. A hesitation. A uncertainty. He walked with the other humans, but his eyes were scanning the Valorian side of the room, searching for something. Searching for her, Lyran realized. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, everything else faded away. The music, the murmur of voices, the other people, all of it became background noise. Lyran saw Cole Harrison see her, and she watched something shift in his expression. He was nervous. This human warrior, this decorated commander who had faced the Dominion in battle 17 times, was afraid of meeting her. The realization struck Lyran with unexpected force. She had spent weeks imagining him as a predator, a being of pure aggression and overwhelming emotion. But in this moment, he looked almost fragile. The formal introductions began. Each Valorian was paired with their intended human partner and given time for a brief greeting. When Lorraine's turn came, she walked across the room toward Cole Harrison with steady steps, refusing to let her fear show. He met her halfway. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the small scar on his jaw, the way his hands hung slightly awkward at his sides as if he did not know what to do with them. "I am Lyran Vosketh," she said in the human language, which she had practiced for weeks. "Cole Harrison," he replied. His voice was deeper than she had expected, rougher. He extended his hand, then seemed to remember something and pulled it back. "Sorry, I read that Valorians prefer not to touch strangers." I should have remembered. He had studied her people. He had tried to learn their customs to avoid making her uncomfortable. Such a small thing, and yet it meant more to Lyran than she could have anticipated. "It is true that we are cautious about touch," she said, "but the hand greeting is acceptable. I have studied human customs as well." She extended her own hand. Cole looked at it for a moment, then carefully wrapped his fingers around hers. His skin was warm, much warmer than a Valorian's. The touch lasted only a second, but Lyran felt something strange pass through her, a spark of connection that she could not explain. "I know this must be strange for you," Cole said quietly. "It's strange for me too. I'm not good at this kind of thing. I'm a soldier. I know how to fight. I don't know how to be a husband." His honesty surprised her. She had expected boasting, or perhaps cold formality. Instead, He was admitting his weakness to her, a stranger, within moments of their meeting. "I am not good at this either," she admitted. "I am a scholar. I know how to study. I do not know how to share my life with someone I have never met." Cole's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "Then, maybe we can figure it out together, if you're willing to try." Lyron looked into his dark human eyes and saw no deception there, no hidden agenda. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a man facing an uncertain future and hoping for the best. "I am willing," she said. It was not love. It was not even trust, not yet. But it was a beginning. And as Lyron stood in that hall, surrounded by humans and Valorians, taking their first careful steps toward understanding, she felt the smallest spark of hope ignite in her chest. Perhaps this human was not the monster she had feared. Perhaps he was something else entirely. The Galactic Accord specified a 10-day courtship period before any marriage ceremony could take place. During this time, the couples were expected to spend several hours each day together, learning about each other and determining whether they could build a life as partners. Lyron approached this period the same way she approached everything, with careful planning and thorough preparation. She created a schedule. Each day would cover different topics. Day 1 would focus on basic biographical information. Day 2 would address family structures and expectations. Day 3 would explore career goals and professional obligations. She had everything organized in neat categories, ready to be discussed in an orderly fashion. Cole Harrison destroyed her plans within the first hour. He arrived at their designated meeting room carrying a small container. Inside was a plant, a strange green thing with thick leaves that grew in odd directions. It was not beautiful by any standard Lyron could recognize. It was lumpy and asymmetrical and looked like something that had grown wrong. "I brought you a gift," Cole said, holding out the container. "It's called a succulent. It's from Earth. I read that Valorians appreciate geometric patterns in nature, and I thought—" He paused, looking at the plant with sudden doubt. "Actually, I don't know what I thought. It doesn't really look geometric at all, does it?" Lyron took the container and examined the plant. He was right. It was not geometric. It was messy and irregular, and completely unlike anything that will grow on Valoria. "I can get you something else," Cole said quickly. "I'm sorry. I'm not good at gifts. My sister used to say I had no sense of what people actually wanted." "Your sister?" Lyron asked, setting aside her planned questions about biographical data. Cole's expression shifted. The nervousness faded, replaced by something softer and sadder. "Katie. She was younger than me by 4 years. She used to tease me about everything. Said I was the most serious person in the universe." "Was?" He was quiet for a moment. "She died 6 years ago. A Dominion raid on a colony called New Boston. She was working as a teacher there, helping kids learn to read." His voice stayed steady, but Lyron could see the pain behind his eyes. "That's why I joined the Navy, not for revenge. I don't believe in revenge. But I thought maybe I could protect other people's sisters, other people's families." Lyron looked at the strange little plant in her hands. This human had lost someone he loved, and instead of turning bitter, he had dedicated his life to preventing others from feeling the same loss. It was exactly the kind of intense emotional response she had read about, but seeing it in person was different from reading about it in a report. "I will keep the plant," she said. "It is not geometric, but it is unique. Like Earth, like humans." Cole smiled, a real smile this time, and Lyron felt something warm spread through her chest. Over the following days, her careful schedule fell apart completely. Instead of organized discussions about practical matters, they found themselves talking about everything and nothing. Cole told her about his childhood in a place called Montana, where the sky stretched so wide you could see storms coming from hours away. He told her about his mother, Linda, who raised him and Katie alone after their father left. He told her about his fear that he would never be good enough, that no matter how many people he saved, it would never make up for the one person he could not save in return. Lyran told him things she had never shared with anyone. She told him about the pressure of being the daughter of the High Matriarch, of always having to be perfect because any failure would reflect on her entire family. She told him about her secret love of old human movies, which she had discovered during her research and found strangely moving. She told him about her fear that she would never find someone who saw her as more than a political symbol. "I see you," Cole said quietly during one of their walks through the station's observation deck. "I don't know anything about Valorian politics. I don't care about your mother's position or your family's standing. I just see Lyran, a woman who's scared and brave and smarter than anyone I've ever met." Lyran stopped walking. Outside the window, stars burned in the endless dark. "How can you say that? You have known me for only 5 days." "I know," Cole admitted, "but humans are fast. We don't live as long as Valorians, so we learn to recognize important things quickly. And you're important. I knew that the moment I saw you. It was too much. Too intense. Too human." Lyran felt overwhelmed by the force of his sincerity. She wanted to step back, to retreat to the safety of logic and planning, but she did not step back. "In Valorian culture," she said slowly, "we believe that true understanding takes centuries. We do not trust quick judgments or sudden feelings." "That sounds lonely," Cole said. "It is safe," Lyran replied. Cole nodded thoughtfully. "I guess that's the difference between us. Humans would rather risk being wrong than miss something real." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Lyran thought about everything she had learned about humans, all the things that had frightened her. Their intensity, their passion, their willingness to throw themselves into love and danger with equal abandon. Standing next to Cole Harrison, she began to wonder if those things were really weaknesses at all. Perhaps they were strengths she had never understood. On the 7th day, he taught her a human card game called poker. She was terrible at it because her face showed every emotion, which Cole said made her the worst bluffer he had ever seen. She laughed when he said it, a real laugh, the kind she had not felt in years. On the 8th day, she read him Valorian poetry, and he listened with his eyes closed, not understanding the words, but somehow understanding the feeling behind them. On the 9th day, they sat together in the observation deck until late at night, talking about their fears for the future, their hopes for the Alliance, their uncertainty about what their life together might look like. "I don't know if I can be a good husband," Cole admitted. "I've never been good at relationships. I'm too focused on work. I forget important things. I push people away when I'm stressed." "I don't know if I can be a good wife," Lyran replied. "I am too logical. I have difficulty expressing emotions. I may seem cold to someone who feels as much as you do." Cole took her hand. His skin was warm against hers. "Then we'll be imperfect together." "That sounds better than being perfect alone." Lyran looked at their joined hands, her pale blue skin against his brown. Two species, two worlds, two completely different ways of seeing the universe. And yet, somehow, in this moment, they fit together. She was falling in love with him. The realization hit her like a wave, sudden and overwhelming. She, Lyran Vosketh, who had been raised to value logic above all else, was falling in love with a human she had known for 9 days. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. She held his hand tighter and watched the stars. The attack came without warning on the 7th day. Lyran was in the station's library, reading through a collection of human poetry that Cole had recommended when the alarms began to scream. The lights shifted from soft white to urgent red. A voice echoed through the speakers, speaking first in the human language and then in Valorian. "Alert! Dominion scout vessel detected. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Lorraine's blood went cold. The Dominion had found them. Despite all the security measures, all the careful planning, the enemy had tracked them to Unity Station. She ran to the central command area, where screens showed the battle unfolding outside. A small Dominion vessel had emerged from a hidden fold in space, too close for the station's outer defenses to engage safely. Station security ships scrambled to intercept, but the enemy craft was fast, a maneuverable dot. Then the first explosion rocked the station. The impact threw Lyran against a wall. Sparks flew from damaged systems. Through the chaos of shouting voices and flashing lights, she heard the worst possible news. The explosion had struck the Valorian residential quarter. A section of the habitat ring had been sealed off due to structural damage, and there were people trapped inside. Life support is failing in that section, a technician reported. Radiation levels are climbing. We need to wait for proper rescue equipment before attempting extraction. How long until the equipment arrives? Counselor Drath demanded. 30 minutes. Maybe more. The people inside will be dead in 20, Lyran said, reading the data on a nearby screen. She could see the oxygen levels dropping, the radiation climbing. There were 15 Valorians trapped in that section, including 3 children from the diplomatic delegation. The Valorian emergency protocols were clear. A rescue attempt under these conditions would be too dangerous. The rational approach was to wait for proper equipment and minimize additional casualties. It was the logical choice, the safe choice. The humans did not wait. Cole Harrison burst into the command center with a team of 6 other humans, all of them already wearing emergency survival gear. "We're going in," he said. It was not a request. "Commander, the radiation levels are beyond safe limits," the station's safety officer protested. "The structural integrity of that section is compromised. You could trigger a further collapse." "Then we'll be fast," Cole replied. He looked at Lyran, and she saw in his eyes a determination that went beyond reason. "There are children in there. We're not leaving them to die." Before anyone could stop them, the humans were gone. Lyran found a screen that showed the internal sensors of the damaged section. She watched as Cole and his team navigated through twisted corridors, climbing over debris and ducking under fallen beams. The radiation warnings on their suits were screaming. The air was thick with smoke and particles. Any logical assessment would say that what they were doing was suicide, but they kept moving. She watched. Cole kicked through a jammed door to reach a room where 4 Valorians had taken shelter. One of them was Seleth, the young woman who had looked so frightened at the first meeting. Cole lifted her in his arms and carried her towards safety while one of his team members, a woman named Grace, performed emergency medical treatment on another injured Valorian. The corridor behind them began to collapse. A ceiling beam fell, and Cole twisted his body at the last moment to shield Seleth from the impact. Lyran saw him stagger, saw blood appear on his shoulder, but he did not stop. He did not even slow down. Another team of humans had found the children. A man named Drew was carrying 2 of them, one in each arm, while a woman named Nadia led the third by the hand, moving quickly through the smoke and chaos. The youngest child, a boy no older than 5, was crying, and Nadia paused just long enough to kneel down and speak to him. Lyran could not hear what she said, but the boy stopped crying and nodded. They kept moving. It took 17 minutes. When the rescue team emerged from the damaged section, they brought with them all 15 trapped Valorians. 4 of the humans had injuries, including Cole, whose shoulder was covered in blood from where a metal fragment had pierced his suit. Lyran ran to him as the medical team swarmed around the survivors. Cole was leaning against the wall, his face gray with exhaustion and pain. A medic was already working on his shoulder, but he barely seemed to notice. Are they all safe? He asked when he saw Lyran. The children. Are they okay? She could not speak. She could only nod. Cole closed his eyes and let out a breath. Good, that's good. Later, after his wound had been treated and he had been ordered to rest, Lyran sat beside his bed in the medical bay. He was half asleep, the pain medication making his thoughts slow and fuzzy. Why? She asked. Why did you risk your life for strangers? People you had never met. People who are not even your own species. Cole opened his eyes. He looked at her for a long moment, as if the question confused him. They mattered to you, he said finally. So they mattered to me. It was such a simple answer. Such a human answer. He had not calculated the risks or considered the political implications. He had seen people in danger, people that Lyran cared about, and he had acted. There's something my grandmother used to say, Cole continued, his voice growing softer as sleep pulled at him. She said that strangers are just friends you haven't made yet. That everyone deserves someone willing to fight for them. He smiled slightly. I always thought that was just something old people said. But the older I get, the more I think she was right. Lyran reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm, as always. Warm and alive. She understood now. She understood what made humans so terrifying to other species. Why civilizations that had existed for thousands of years watched these young, short-lived creatures with a mixture of fear and wonder. It was not their aggression or their persistence or their numbers. It was their hearts. Humans loved without reservation, without calculation, without the careful logic that other species used to protect themselves from pain. They gave everything they had, held nothing back, and accepted the inevitable heartbreak as the price of living fully. It was reckless. It was foolish. It was the most beautiful thing Lyran had ever seen. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to Cole's hand in the Valorian gesture of deep respect. Thank you, she whispered. He was already asleep, but she thought she saw him smile. Outside the medical bay, the station's repairs were beginning. Humans and Valorians worked side by side, clearing debris and restoring systems. The Dominion scout had been destroyed, and reinforcements were on their way. The crisis was over, but for Lyran, something had changed that could never be unchanged. She had seen the truth of humanity, and she would never forget it. She loved him. She loved this strange, brave, reckless human man, and she was no longer afraid. The ceremony took place on the 10th day, as the Galactic Accord had specified. The Great Hall of Unity Station had been transformed for the occasion. One half was decorated in the Valorian style, with floating crystal lights and flowing fabrics in shades of blue and silver. The other half showed human traditions, with flowers from Earth and candles that flickered like tiny stars. Lyran stood in the small room off the main hall, looking at herself in a mirror. She wore a gown that combined both cultures, silver Valorian silk with human lace at the edges. Her hair was arranged in the traditional Valorian wedding style, but she had added small white flowers that Cole's mother had brought from Earth. Her own mother stood beside her, adjusting the fabric of her gown. High Matriarch Saloon had arrived the day before, traveling across 3 star systems to attend her daughter's wedding. She had been quiet since her arrival, watching everything with careful eyes. You have changed, Saloon said softly. In just 10 days, you have become someone I barely recognize. Lyran met her mother's gaze in the mirror. I was afraid at first. Afraid of the humans. Afraid of him. But I am not afraid anymore. I can see that. Saloon was quiet for a moment. When I agreed to send you here, I did it for duty. For the Alliance. For our people. I did not expect you to find happiness. I hoped, perhaps, but I did not expect it. Neither did I, Lyran admitted. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of physical affection. I watched the recordings from the attack. I saw what your human did, how he risked his life for our people. I saw the way he looked at you afterward, even through his pain. She paused. I was wrong about humans. I thought they were dangerous because of their emotions. Now I think they are beautiful because of them. Lyran turned and embraced her mother, something she had not done since childhood. Saloon stiffened for a moment, surprised, then slowly wrapped her arms around her daughter. Be happy, Saloon whispered. That is all I want for you. Be happy. The ceremony began an hour later. Lyran walked down the aisle between rows of seated guests, humans on one side and Valorians on the other. She saw Counselor Drath, looking proud. She saw Seleth, the young woman Cole had saved, crying openly with joy. She saw human officers in their dress uniforms and Valorian nobles in their formal robes. And at the end of the aisle, she saw Cole. He stood straight despite the injury to his shoulder, which was still healing beneath his formal jacket. His dark eyes were fixed on her, and in them she saw everything she had come to love about him. His courage, his honesty, his overwhelming, terrifying, wonderful capacity to feel the efficient was a neutral party, a member of a species called the Thalon who had agreed to preside over the ceremony. She spoke the words in the human language first, then in Valorian, binding the two of them in the eyes of both civilizations. Then it was time for their personal vows. Cole went first. His voice was steady, but Lyran could see the emotion beneath the surface. Lyran, 10 days ago, I was more scared than I've ever been in my life. Not scared of you, but scared of disappointing you. Scared that I wouldn't be good enough. Scared that a guy from Montana who doesn't know the first thing about poetry or crystal mountains could never deserve someone like you. He paused, taking a breath. But then I got to know you, and I learned that you were scared too. That behind all that Valorian calm, there was someone just as uncertain as me. That made me braver, knowing that we were facing the unknown together. I can't promise I'll be a perfect husband. I'll forget important things. I'll work too hard. I'll probably make you angry at least once a week. But I can promise that I will love you every day, with everything I have, for as long as my heart beats. Several of the human guests were crying openly now. Lyran noticed that even some of the Valorians had tears in their eyes, a rare sight for her people. Now it was her turn. She had prepared words, careful phrases chosen for their diplomatic appropriateness. But standing here, looking at Cole, those words seemed hollow. Before I came here, I studied everything I could about humans, she began. I read that you were aggressive. I read that you were emotional. I read that you felt things with an intensity that my people considered almost dangerous. She saw Cole's expression flicker with uncertainty, and she smiled. All of those things are true. You are intense. You are emotional. You love so fiercely that it frightens those who do not understand. But I understand now. I understand that your intensity is not weakness, but strength. I understand that your emotions are not flaws, but gifts. I understand that when a human loves someone, they love with every part of their being, holding nothing back. You showed me this truth when you ran into a collapsing corridor to save people you had never met. You showed me when you carried a child through fire and radiation without hesitation. You showed me every day of the past 10 days, in small ways and large, that humans are not the monsters I feared. You are something far more terrifying. You are beings who love without conditions, who give without counting the cost, who fight for strangers as if they were family. I was afraid of that love once. I'm not afraid anymore. Cole Harrison, I choose you. I choose your intensity. I choose your emotions. I choose all the loud, overwhelming, beautiful things that make you human. And I will spend the rest of my life grateful that you chose me. The officiant spoke the final words. Cole placed a ring on Lorraine's finger, a simple band of silver from Earth. Then Laren placed her palm against his chest, over his heart, and shared her luminescence with him. It was a Valorian bonding tradition, a gift of inner light that she had never shared with anyone before. Cole gasped as the light flowed into him. For a moment, his eyes glowed with the same blue light that flickered beneath Lyran's skin. Then it faded, absorbed into him, becoming part of him forever. "You may complete the union according to your traditions," the officiant announced. Cole looked at Lyran, suddenly nervous again. "I know Valorians don't usually. I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to." She kissed him before he could finish the sentence. It was nothing like she had imagined. All her research, all her careful study of human customs, had not prepared her for the reality. The warmth of his lips, the gentle strength of his arms as they wrapped around her, the sound of cheering from the human guests and surprised gasps from the Valorians. She had thought kissing was barbaric. She had thought it was unsanitary. She thought she might very much like to do it again. Afterward, as they stood together at the reception, watching humans and Valorians mingle and laugh and celebrate, Cole leaned close to her. "Any regrets?" he asked. Lyran looked at him, this strange, wonderful, utterly human man who had crashed into her life and changed everything. She thought about the fear she had felt on her homeworld, the dread that had filled her heart as she boarded the transport to Unity Station. That fear was gone now. In its place was something warmer, something stronger. "None," she said. "Not a single one." Cole smiled, that full, bright human smile that she had once found so alarming. Now it looked like home. "Me neither," he said. They stood together, hand in hand, watching as two civilizations took their first steps toward true friendship. The Dominion was still out there, a threat that would take years to defeat. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges neither of them could predict, but they would face it together. Human and Valorian, heart and mind, courage and logic. Lyran had come to Unity Station expecting to find a monster. Instead, she had found a partner, a friend, a love. She had found her human, and she would not trade him for all the crystal mountains of Valoria. Years later, when their children asked how their parents had met, Lyran would tell them the truth. She would tell them that she had been afraid at first, afraid of the strange, intense beings from a little planet called Earth. But then she met one of them, and everything changed. "Your father taught me something important," she would say to them, watching as her human Valorian children ran through the garden of their home on Unity Station. "He taught me that love is not something to fear. It is something to embrace, fully and completely, no matter how much it frightens you." Cole would smile at her from across the room, older now, but still burning with that same human fire, and Lyran would smile back, grateful for every day of her wonderfully uncertain, perfectly imperfect life.